45 minutes. We have a lot of people who want to ask questions, and I just ask everyone, please, starting now, to keep your questions pointed, to ask only your question. We can talk about this. We're going to be talking about all of this for a long time to come. But it's in the interest of democracy, to give everybody a chance. I'm going to ask both the questioners and the speakers to keep their remarks succinct.
Thank you, and thank you to the speakers. I have a question for Dean Slaughter. Sorry. I'm interested in your opinion. I feel like not so much the circumstances or who is to blame, but the opinion was most important to me. And I feel the answer, if you allow me to be a little bit reductionist, of why you personally support Condoleezza Rice was, well, Princeton thinks it's great that blacks can make it too. Or Princeton thinks it's great that women can make it too.
We do.
But that's not the issue, and that's not the point. My question is, to what degree is that not absolutely condescending when the thing that is issue, the thing that is absolutely at the heart of the issue of saying we support representative administrative X is what they're doing within the government, is what their policies are, is what kind of action they're taking. There would not be a point to which Princeton would publish on the webpage, we support Bill Clinton because he got great grades at Harvard. That doesn't happen for white men. This is an attitude towards women where we can think, well, we can be in support of her because she's made it, or in support of her because she dresses great. But I really think that condescends to a large degree to what the issue is, and what everyone reading a statement of support is going to think, this is about issues, this is about opinions, this is about attitudes. And I didn't get the feeling that I understood besides what I felt like more than sarcastic remark out of the side of the mouth about policy. That policy would be central. That policy would be the thing that, in fact, Princeton would be asked to make support or non-support of.
Okay, let me see if I can do this succinctly. I took as my premise that we all accept that inviting someone does not mean endorsing their policy. That has to be true in a university. Otherwise, we could not have freedom of inquiry, freedom of debate. We must be able to invite anyone we like without thereby being assumed to endorse that person's policy. So whether we invite Condoleezza Rice, or whether we invite Madeleine Albright on the other side, or whether we invite sharp critics of the administration like Richard Clarke, who stood up and denounced everything this administration has done on 9/11, is not a statement about whether we endorse their policies. I'm starting with that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't debate those policies, and we shouldn't debate those policies in every place we can, preferably with her. I would have been delighted if somebody had asked a sharp question about Iraq. No one did, and I was calling as best I could. The question is, what did I mean when I said she exemplifies our highest values? I clearly didn't mean we endorse her policies. So what did I mean? And what I said was, we are a university, and particularly we are a school that believes that you actually have an obligation to put whatever skills or talents you have to work in the service of the nation and of the world. And from that point of view, she has done that, and she's done that, and along the way, she's traveled a particularly long road, which I find simply indicates her determination to do this. I think if more of us believed that we ought to be in government, whether it's running for office or being in office, then government might reflect who we are more.
I think that, unfortunately, the personal attacks you were making on Dean Slaughter sort of covered a more important point. I mean, personally, I wouldn't mind if Dean Slaughter ended up in Washington. I've read her blog. I think that would be kind of nice. But I think we missed a major problem with when she was mentioned Kofi Annan. The explanation she gave was that Kofi Annan will fill a room. The people that you mentioned will not. And I study the Middle East, and I don't recognize some of the names on your list, and that is a problem to me. And I think that a larger problem than just us power brokering, I mean, of course we power broker, we're partly an economic institution, is that we prestige broker, right? I mean, we bring in speakers that all of us are going to know, that we're all kind of heard of. And this is, I mean, another, same problem that the media has. It's not just that the media is corrupt, it's that they want to, they want their audience to recognize who they're talking about. And so I guess my question is what we think that the university can do to do a better job of bringing students to understand, to come to lectures of people that they don't recognize and understand that those are important, not just bring in people that we'll all get really excited about and be like, yay, Princeton's so prestigious because, Kofi Annan will come and speak here. So.
In a sense, you've made the point I was trying to make. Apparently, I didn't make it too well. If you're studying the Middle East in the United States in 2006, and you don't know who the majority of the people on the list I gave you are, your university is misserving you badly, misserving our country badly.
I'm not going to debate the question about whether one should get very recognizable names for very big events. I think for a big event, you absolutely want someone of prominence, whether they will fill a name. But I absolutely think we bring lots of people here that people would not recognize.
Never heard of.
Never heard of. I mean, if I just went through the list, I won't in the interest of time, but I have a 3-page list of all the people who have come here this fall, and half of them you would have never heard of, and the other half you might vaguely have heard of. But they, of course, they include the current ambassador from Iran, right, and the foreign minister from Pakistan, who came. They may not attract the same kinds of crowds, but they attract a small crowd who's very committed and very interesting. Those events are in the bowls downstairs. The bigger name people are in the big bowls, and the biggest name people come when we have alumni here, as well as our students in the community. But I take the force of the point.
But I think it's very important not to downplay the role of quality and challenge. That every once in a while you're going to find people who are high quality and a major challenge, and you do know them. Because many times when you don't know them at all, but they're of high quality and they're challenged to the students, to unsettle the students. You don't know them at all. They need to be here. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I am highly suspicious of public bureaucrats and government bureaucrats, because it's not a culture of Socratic engagement.
Can I just...
They're smart, they're brilliant, they're rarely Socratic because they're in a culture of conformity. And I'm into maladjustment and non-conformity. That's Socratic. That's one of the reasons why I'm suspicious. I'm not against them. They can prove themselves. Some camels get through the eye of needles.
We've spent 3 decades in this country running against government. And I would suggest to you that's a large part of the reason we're in the fix we're in. Because even what you said, government bureaucrats, right? Who wants to be in government?
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying in high-quality dialogue at Princeton, I highly encourage people to go into government.
But they're not bureaucrats.
What do you mean they're not bureaucrats?
In other words, to say, we ought to have high-quality people, not government bureaucrats, it is a small instance of exactly the point. Republicans first, but Democrats too, running against the government. So the result is nobody wants to fund the government, nobody wants the government to do anything.
No.
Absolutely.
It's a longer issue, but Socratic intellectuals are not major causes of low quality among government bureaucrats.
I didn't say that.
It's a larger, more complex story we can tell. But I'm not, I don't think it is a running against government. It's just when we want high dialogue to challenge our students, if you look to government bureaucrats, it's going to be difficult. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm writing them off and so forth, and I'm not running against government. How diplomatic. But it's true, but that's true across ideology. It's true in every regime. That's
what intellectuals do. They're suspicious of these folk who tell lies and don't want to expose the truth.
Well, I mean,
but bureaucrats have been doing that since the beginning of time. That doesn't mean all of them are unworthy, but they know what they're involved in, Mrs. I mean, let's be honest about this.
Well, I just worry about all those professors who tell lies too, but
Absolutely.
That's another story.
That's right.
I'm suspicious of my colleagues. But I think everybody is, nobody's above suspicion. Ever.
Absolutely.
Because we're all human beings, and this is the way we are. But I think, well, I'm going to shut up. I just couldn't resist that part. Over there. I think, is that right? Or over here? Over here? Sorry.
Well, I guess the last 5 minutes you've been basically discussing possible answers to what I was going to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Starting out from Mr. Brushansky's distinction between being a servant to the government and being a servant to the nation, there's a difference there. I want to throw a very provocative statement that I'm sure not really everyone here, but lots of people here will agree with me with that statement that will sound extremely provocative, but actually to some of us it's common sense. I would say, for example, that the only real public servant that this country has had in the last 2-3 decades is Edward Said. So with that concept of what it means to be a public servant, the way string of speakers in the Woodrow Wilson celebrations and in prior years as well, the way it's been constructed, the process of selection, the criterion, and the way they've been treated. You say you wanted more discussion, real debate. You would have loved to have stingy questions, but the fact is that it never happened. It wasn't there, and what we see is simply a string of speakers who come to give propaganda of their policies. But given my provocative statement, I don't see any of them as public servants. The definition of the concept public servant is not applicable to them. So they're definitely government servants, which is a different thing. So then this makes you look, because you picked them and everything, makes you look like you're paying servant to the government servants, which is a completely different route from being a servant to the nation, which would be like the motor and the whole topic of this forum. I don't know.
Thank you. I have a suggestion. You talk to the Robertsons, and I'll stand back. I think there are many forms of public service. There are public servants in non-governmental organizations, and we have lots of those. Journalists, critics of various kinds, activists, and there are indeed public servants in the private sector who are working hard to address public problems if we think what they're doing is serving the public good. So public servant is a much wider category than government servant. I personally believe that government service is a distinct and I think most important form of public service. It's by no means the only form, but I do think, as I've said repeatedly, and as I think after Katrina, it's hard to deny, you can have all the dedicated public service you want in the nonprofit sector and indeed in the private sector, but without a strong, effective, committed government that represents the people fairly, it doesn't matter. So I feel particularly strongly about government service, and I did so long before that ever became an issue on the pages of the Wall Street Journal. Nevertheless, we recognize a much broader range of public service, and we invite people from that spectrum to the school. I agree they were not there on the 75th, but I've tried to explain why, in part, we didn't have the range of speakers we wanted, and I've also said, I think, for a School of Public and International Affairs on its 75th anniversary, named after Woodrow Wilson, having a Secretary of State, and we originally thought a senator and another cabinet member was entirely appropriate. I just wish they'd engaged much more forcefully with the audience.
If I could just add just a brief comment. I would be much more inclined to accept what I'm hearing from Dean Slaughter tonight if I didn't live in Washington, if I hadn't attended many seminars and forums that take place in Washington, almost everyone, in fact everyone that I can think of, reflect the same pattern that took place here on the 75th. And I bet if time permitted and we looked at the speakers lists and we looked at how it was handled, we'd hear about a lot more excuses about how it just wasn't possible to get this speaker or this speaker and things changed and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, the pattern is very clear, and if time permits, we could actually just go through the record and look at what this school has done in the past, say since 9/11, and I think you would find that what happened on 9/11 was, what happened on the 75th was no aberration. It was very much part of a pattern.
I'd be happy to take the challenge any day. Go through one by one.
That's the next. I hope I can come back and accept that challenge. I hope this time the Woodrow Wilson School will actually put it on their calendar and will actually contribute to it because neither was done in this forum.
That's not true, is it?
Oh, well, according to the organizers, we contributed.
According to the organizers who I had lunch with today, it was one roadblock after another, including the fact that they wanted to use the picture that the Alumni magazine had already used and that the Woodrow Wilson School had already put in many places of our dealing with Condi Rice, and they were refused permission to even use the picture.
Can we move on?
You're not talking about
The same way.
Dr. West, do you think that extreme intellectual liberalism can turn the Socratic system of dialogue into an essentially anti-establishment monologue, just based against the establishment? And how do you think that this sort of intellectual liberalism should balance an institution like Princeton, where there is internal bureaucracy, but also what you called the wheel of truth?
I appreciate the question. Very quickly. I won't put it in a nutshell. Anything put in a nutshell belongs in one. When I talk about Socratic, I'm talking about a variety of different perspectives across the board. So extreme liberalism, extreme conservatism, extreme leftism, extreme Judaism, extreme Christianity, and so forth. A set of voices alongside a whole host of voices, so that we all are exposed to a variety of perspectives that unsettle us. Do I want Princeton to become a bastion of anti-establishmentarian dialogue? Absolutely not. Do I spend much of my life engaged in anti-establishmentarian projects outside of Princeton? Absolutely. Very different. As a citizen of this community, I acknowledge the rich tradition that it represents. As a citizen, I also acknowledge radical traditions that are preoccupied with wealth, privilege, male supremacy, white supremacy, and so forth. That's why I started invoking this brother's text. Not because he's my partner, but also because it's those kind of movements that make these kinds of places more Socratic. See what I mean? I mean, Edward Said is not by himself. He's part of a movement of a struggle for self-determination of an oppressed people. And he expresses that vision in the United States, and he's simply one voice to be scrutinized among others. And needs to be criticized by Israeli intellectuals of the right, of the center, of the left, and so forth and so on. That's the conversation in the context of Princeton. You see what I mean? So you have different identities in this regard. Thanks so much.
James Madison's also in my book. And he went to Princeton too. And the dialectic, if we can use that word anymore.
Oh, yeah, we can still use it.
Good. I thought you thought so. Of oppression, democracy, high, low, all of that, it's all together.
Okay.
And left and right never are pure, they're always in contact with one another.
That's right.
That's my other editorial. Sir.
Thank you. I do agree that the central debate here is the statement that Condoleezza Rice exemplifies, I forget the exact words, the Woodrow Wilson School. And I, as a graduate of the Woodrow Wilson School, I was anxious to hear the explanation of why that's true. And the explanation made me sad. The explanation is that she's in public service, that she had a quest for power, she followed it, and she got into the government. Now by that definition, Tom DeLay exemplifies the Woodrow Wilson School, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, McNamara, and 100 officials that I knew worked with who were in jail. I have always felt that what exemplifies the Woodrow Wilson School, I hope I felt this, is excellence and honesty and public service of a quality, not power and abuse of public service and lying. That's my point.
With that, and I find it a powerful statement. And there are certainly people who have served in government that I don't know if they're people, well, there's some people I would not invite, and there's certainly other people whom I would not praise in the same way. So clearly you're right, that simply serving in government itself is not exemplary of the values that we serve. And to the extent that I thought it was as clear as you think it is, and that many people think it is, that Secretary Rice, in your view, is someone who has lied and betrayed those values, then I think that's a much closer question. The difficulty here is precisely separating out personal political views, institutional views, policy, and policy questions. And we could have a long debate. I think personally that much of what Secretary Rice has done since being in office as Secretary of State has been actually trying very hard to turn the administration in what I think is a better, although still far from, in my view, my personal view, perfect direction. So there is an area there where my judgment, and I think more generally the judgment in society, in other words, there's not been anything proved in court like the Watergate officials that you are talking about, does shape, does enter in here. And there I think I can understand where, if you, holding the views you do, you read what I said very differently. What I can tell you is that I think we share those values. I do not think Secretary Rice is perfect. I think the same could be said of many government officials in the Clinton administration, but I do think, as I said, that she is sincere in doing what she thinks is right, that she has tried in many ways, I think, to fight a fight that I think needed to be fought in Washington, and that above all, I don't think it's just the lust for power. I think, quite honestly, she is someone who was in the academy, had a wonderful job in the academy, went to Washington, went back to Washington again to shape government because she believed she could make a difference. And part of what I've been arguing all evening is that you can rail at government, but if you really want government to reflect your policy views, it's not just about voting for your candidate. It's about actually being there. When Richard Clark was here, he ripped apart the Bush administration, and at the end of it, I said, you have been in government for over 25 years. You've just torn apart this administration. Would you tell this audience to join this administration at this moment? And he said, Absolutely. I went to Washington in 1973 when I was completely opposed to everything the government was doing in Vietnam, and I wanted to be part of what I could do within the government to make a difference. And in that sense, I understand your point of view, but I think Condi Rice is closer to that ideal than perhaps you do.